Hey guys, I'm the 50s Kid. This is my E46 BMW, and this video is going to be a continuation of last week's video where we discovered that my water pump, which is maybe only 2 years old, maybe 10,000 miles old, is actually leaking, and that's kind of a problem. So in this video, we're going to change the water pump, and then we're going to actually kind of check out things and see if, you know, like what has happened. And it's been 2 weeks actually since I filmed that last video, so we'll see what's up. Anyway, let's get started. So we're going to be draining the radiator out to do this job, and you want to actually take the radiator cap off, or the expansion tank cap off, before you do that. And we also want to actually remove the bleeder screw from the upper radiator hose. That way, just the fluid, the air can kind of get in there and help that to drain out as well. So if you have the OEM radiator, you're going to have a blue drain plug right here, which is just a Phillips. Unscrew that. If you have the aftermarket Bear radiator like I do, you're going to have to unscrew the whole entire thing right here. This is actually a 22. Most of the aftermarkets follow this pattern. The actual drain plug is different. So we'll just let that drain. So now we got to get the air scoop off and the fan and fan shroud out. Just kind of pull up on these. I've done this in many videos before. Hopefully all of you have seen my common repair steps video. So I actually have the manual fan in this thing, and it's actually a lot harder for me to remove, or a lot easier, I should say, for me to remove this thing. You just got to do that and that. I don't keep the little thing on this side because it's kind of not necessary. The whole thing just pulls right out like that, which is really super convenient, you know. But if you have the automatic fan, which, you know, 90% of you are going to have that, I've got a video dedicated to just how to remove that fan. So I will go ahead and link to that on the screen and in the description. So I'm also going to remove the air filter box. Absolutely not necessary in order to change a water pump, but I'm just judging by what I saw earlier down underneath the car, which I haven't shown you yet, but I will. I'm still seeing a little bit of oil, and there was actually oil on underneath the car, but it wasn't right underneath here. It was actually down where the aluminum skid plate was, as if, you know, the oil had been trickling off and kind of falling off the engine onto the skid plate and then rolling off the back of the skid plate. So I still would suspect, you know, what we took care of in the last week's video, I still would suspect that, you know, that gasket to be sort of the source of the leak, but maybe not the gasket itself. Maybe the oil filter housing might have something wrong with it. You know, the one thing I didn't do in last week's video was inspect that thing for cracks. I didn't suspect cracks because I saw that broken gasket, but I don't know, man. I'm still seeing oil dripping, so I think I might want to inspect things. So anyway, I'm gonna just take this stuff off in preparation. You know, you got to get one of these flexible 6mm nut drivers. It's really nice, especially for taking off the band clamp down through here and stuff. It's actually really nice. I'm one of the specialty tools, I suppose, that I'm glad I picked up. Specialty tool because it's really not something that anyone needs, or something that everyone needs, but it comes in handy on this particular car. So the parts for this video were provided by OEMBimmerparts.com. I emailed the guys over there and said, you know, hey, send me the OEM water pump for this thing, because I tried to buy a Miley last time and it only lasted 2 years. So, you know, what's the OEM brand? Soleri. It's an Italian company. They're the ones who make the OEM water pump. He also threw in an idler pulley, because my idler pulley actually has a problem there, the top one. And he even threw in another oil filter housing gasket, which is super nice. That site, man, is really awesome. If you go and check it out, you'll see that it was definitely put together by enthusiasts. You know, the whole thing is like categorized by car, and each section is just kind of like curated. You know, they only have the products that you actually are gonna need to change. It's not like all spammed with Chinese sellers like Amazon is, you know, where like you can't really find anything and it's just really hard to. this site is more categorized, and you can just go in there and see. You can find out what the OEM brands are, because they sell, you know, they tell you what the brand is, they tell you which one is OEM. They also have, you know, one after. They usually have an OEM brand and an aftermarket brand for each thing, and you know, they only pick and choose the good brands though. So even though it's an aftermarket brand, it's a good aftermarket brand if you want to, you know, kind of go a little cheaper, which hey, sometimes we have to, right? But I would recommend not doing that. I'm learning these days, just spend a little bit extra money and get the OEM stuff. Anyway, check them out. They're really awesome and really fast shipping too. So before you go taking your belt off, you want to actually crack these 4 bolts loose first. You just need a 10 mil in order to do that. This way, the tension from the belt actually holds the water pump pulley in place. And if you wait until after, then the thing's just going to spin around on you. So these are actually not super tight because I had them off last week. You know, if you haven't had them off in 100,000 miles, they're going to be tighter than that. Just, you know, just how it goes. Just all you have to do is crack them right now. Don't have to take them all the way off, and now we can take off the belt. So before we make any mess, we want to get this belt out of here for sure. You need a nice long ratchet or a breaker bar with a 3-inch extension, 16 millimeter socket. This is if you have the old manual tensioner design. If you have the newer hydraulic tensioner, there isn't going to be a little 16 millimeter holder right here, and instead you're going to actually have to take the cover off of this pulley right here, I believe. Pretty sure that it's that one, and you stick a I think it's a T50 that you stick in the middle of that bolt, and then you're going to turn it, and it's going to compress the actual hydraulic piston down. In this case, we're going to just turn this, slip the belt out like this, and then you also want to get it out from under this top pulley as well, and just let the tension off of that sucker. Now we're also going to need to take off this bottom pulley because I want to get the belts out completely. So this one, it's kind of similar. Okay, so I'm talking down there. I've slipped on just the same kind of thing, 16 millimeter. So let me go ahead and do that. We'll grab that pulley out. That's it, or the belt out, sorry. And that's all you got to do. Again, let down tension. And we'll take out our belts, get those out of the way. So now we can finish pulling off the 10 millimeter nuts and get the pulley off. So I feel like we've come to a crossroads in this particular job. There are two courses we could take. The problem that I see is that the coolant is still completely in the expansion tank here. So not everything has drained out at all from the radiator side. You know, you still got coolant just in the expansion tank, which means in the 2 hoses, one that comes back from the engine, one that comes back from the radiator inside the car. It's not a radiator, the heater core inside the car. So what we could do, typically what we would do at this point is just unbolt the water pump and let all of the coolant drain out from the front of the engine. The thing is that a lot of that might miss my drain reservoir, and I might end up having to mop up coolant. I don't want to do that. I would rather drain as much out as I possibly can. One easy way to do that is just to pull out the little metal tab that hooks this down into the into the fitting where it hooks into the expansion tank, and just kind of, you know, we can pull out the top hose and then pull out the expansion tank a little and break the seal, and that'll just kind of drain out the contents down into my drain bin, which is right underneath it. And that's kind of a controlled, easy way to drain out most of the fluid from the inside of the vehicle, or the inside of the engine. Hopefully most of the fluid. The problem with that is if I go and break seals, if I go and break the seal of that O-ring, I think I run the risk of just having an issue with that O-ring down the road. I do have a whole replacement set of O-rings for every hose on this vehicle that I bought from a seller on eBay, which is really awesome. I'll try to find that guy's listing and put it down in the description so I can replace it if need be, and I don't have to go out and buy another expansion tank and all that stuff. It's just the decision of which way do I want to go. Do I risk the mess, or do I kind of try to contain the mess a little bit? I think maybe I'll try to contain the mess, and we'll see what happens. So I'm gonna pop up these things here. The only reason I'm doing this is because these components have been changed fairly recently. If these were super old, I would never be able to get them off that easily. It'd be really difficult, and I wouldn't want to do it. So see, that came off fairly reasonably, draining out a little, but my pan's right underneath it. It's all being caught. I can tell, I can see that it's all being caught. Okay, now I'm also going to pull up on this. Again, this would be super difficult to get out. Oops, I don't want to crack that actually. This would be super difficult to get out normally, but pops up fairly easily because again, it's a recent change. So this is typically probably not what you would do. You would just take the water pump out, let all of this drain out from the water pump. So you can hear all of that. That's all basically coming from the engine. It's basically coming from this tube right here, this pipe, which actually connects into the side of the expansion tank. And that's essentially what we're draining out right there. If you're a professional technician, you're working on this, you're doing this job, basically I think you don't even touch any of these components without a plan to replace them, especially if they're this old. So I think when you sell this job, you just sell coolant pipes or whatever it is you're gonna do. In this case, you know, you would just go the water pump route because you don't care about your floor. If you're a technician, you know, that's just par for the course. You probably have a bigger drain container and all that stuff, so you wouldn't even touch what you don't want to break, right? My situation's a little different, as I said, but typically I think if you're doing these jobs, you just plan to replace them because you don't want a comeback, right? And in my case, I think I would just be changing the O-rings on all of these if they were, you know, if I was in that kind of a situation, if I knew the part was fairly recent, you know, I would change the O-rings. I would have the O-rings just to change them. So I've just gone ahead and seated the expansion tank back into its slot. I didn't take it I mean, I think I did take it all the way off, but it sat down right back in super easily. And we'll see how this goes here. Okay, that snapped on and that snapped on. So no harm, I think, to anything. And we just drained out most of the coolant from the block. So now I'm gonna move the pan directly underneath the engine and we'll pull the water pump out. I'm also gonna screw back in the radiator drain just right now so that way I don't forget. Also be aware that this O-ring, again, if you break this seal, this O-ring might start to leak. You know, it's happened to me before. And you just, again, if you have that kit from that eBay seller, you're not going to be caught out in a situation like this because this is not even a typical part number that you could get at your local parts store. The regular OEM drain is the blue drain plug comes up, but this aftermarket one, I believe you can only get it off eBay and stuff. So just be aware of that. Be aware that you might need this particular O-ring. So these are all of the O-rings you actually get from that eBay seller. And so like these are all the rings for the insides of the tubes, you know, of the coolant hoses. These as well, I believe the smaller ones right here and here. Not sure where all the rest of these go, but I just want to see, you know, do you get this O-ring? And I believe this is the O-ring in question right there. That looks exactly the right size for that guy right there. So yes, you get that O-ring. I'm assuming that either these two or these two are for the automatic transmission cooler. It's probably these two. So you've got your drain plug one. This is probably for the fitting that goes on the front of the radiator. You know, I'm not exactly sure what we call that. Where the expansion tank kind of sits into, it has a little tube that kind of connects into the radiator at the very bottom. So you need an O-ring for that. I believe that's the O-ring for that. This is the O-ring for this little sensor in the lower coolant hose. So you definitely need to change that O-ring whenever you're doing that if you're gonna swap your sensor over. So that's the O-ring for that. This is probably for the bleeder screw. So, or it's probably for the OEM drain plug thing, you know, goes in the middle there. So yeah, kind of a cool kit. I think it was about 20 bucks. Great insurance to have just in case you're stranded. You know, you buy a new expansion tank and the O-ring, the big O-ring leaks. Just, it happens. So great thing to have. I'll try to find them and throw them down in the description. All right, so now we're gonna pull off the nuts that hold the water pump on. They're 410s. So your water pump, having been in there for 100,000 miles, will be difficult to get out. So the way that you actually do it is you're gonna use some of your fan pulley bolts to actually press it out. You see they gave you these little screws right here, these little slots. We're just going to thread those in, and then we'll just alternate on either side, and we'll use that to sort of press the thing out. Just like this, watch. A little bit on either side. Remember to put your drain pan underneath this in the center. Okay. Once you've gone that far, you should be able to get the thing out. Still going to have a little bit of water. Just let that out in a controlled fashion. So you can see that we did not have much because we drained most of it out. You honestly could have done that. Only that, or I could have done only that. But I just decided to do this. So now we're going to get our OEM pump installed. Let's check this out. Now I took a look on OEM Bimmer Parts, and they actually have 3 options for water pumps. They have, you know, their value line, which has the metal impeller. I think it's a Graph brand. And they also have this brand, Solari, which is the OEM. And they have a high performance one, which is made by Stewart, which you may have heard about. So you have options there of what to go with. So this one comes with our water pump gasket pre-installed, which is nice. You can use some coolant to kind of lube that gasket up. I prefer to use silicone paste. Silicone paste is rubber safe, and it's just my preferred thing to use. I just use sort of a light coating, just enough to sort of prevent any rubber gasket from tearing. So that's kind of all you need. Okay, we're gonna go in. Slide it on, and we're home. So the torque is gonna be not a lot, like 10 foot-pounds. It's basically like snug it up, give it a quarter turn or a 1/8 turn, and you're good. I'm just gonna make sure these are all just sort of tight, and they're all tight. That's it. We're done with that. So we have come to the part of the video where I'm gonna take all this apart again, just so I can make absolutely sure that there's no cracks in my oil filter housing or anything like that. A lot of work to, extra work to do, especially since I just did this 2 weeks ago, but it's good insurance. I still see oil trickling down there, and it's not exactly sure where it's coming from. So I'm just gonna pause. I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna film any of that. I'll replace this pulley in the process. I want to thank those guys again for sending that out. That was really nice of them. So they sent me a new INPA pulley. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and this time I'm going to pull the whole oil filter housing all the way out. So I'm going to unbolt the power steering pump from it and everything, pull it all the way out, and just get a good look at it, make sure it's okay. Okay guys, the whole oil filter housing is out and gone. We'll take a look at that in a second. I just want to point out to you that here is where the actual leak has been happening, again on the front, just like in the last video, and then dripping down in front like that. You can see that it's kind of pinkish. It's definitely still mixed with a little bit of oil, I think. It's entirely possible, I suppose. Let me put it this way. This oil right here, this is from when I took the thing off just now. There was no oil leakage down below here that I could see at all before I took the housing off, from underneath. So I don't suspect kind of anything to do with that. I think it's sealed and it did its job. It's still just basically all on the front here, which again is water pump. I guess the coolant would dry up into that kind of a goo, that kind of a sludge maybe. I'm hoping. I cannot see any other source of where oil might be leaking. Nothing up here. There's no damage or anything that I can see. So yeah. So as far as the oil filter housing goes, there's nothing wrong with it that I can see on my visual inspection here. I can't see any cracks or anything like that. The gasket's good, of course, only 2 weeks old. We'll just end up changing it anyway. But one thing I'm suspecting is perhaps, maybe, this thing is warped over time and it's not really sitting flat. That's always a possibility. I'm thinking this because one of my viewers actually commented on one of my videos recently that that situation happened to him. So I'm going to pull this gasket out of here and check for flatness. So the news is it's actually good. There's no visible rock at all. I'm just kind of trying to feel for the edges along either side, and I can tell that we're not seriously warped or anything. We're flat all the way across. I can see contact at this end and this end, so all good, not warped at all, which is a good thing. Okay, let's finish up this job, guys. The water pump pulley, these two holes are sort of offset from these, so it actually goes only one way. So we'll tilt our water pump in the right orientation, and let's see if we can spy our holes. Probably about right there. Yeah, there we go. So we'll just get these started. We'll get our belts on, and we will finish up. It is always difficult for me to film this particular part, so I'm not going to struggle with it this time. I'm just going to show you what it looks like when it's on. You can kind of see the general procedure here. Get it over your pulleys. Make sure that you're aligned on each one of your pulleys, and that's all you really need to do. So I'm going to go ahead and put the bottom one on, and then I'm going to show you the orientation. So now this is the orientation of your belts. This belt, the belt comes up over the top of the pulley on the air conditioning pump. On this serpentine belt, you can see it just goes around the outside corners of all of the ribbed pulleys. It goes underneath this pulley here, around here, comes around the crankshaft pulley, goes around this pulley like that, and then comes back up here. So that's it. That's how it goes. Not that difficult to do. Now, your final, most important step, do not forget this. Come in here, tighten up these bolts. Because if these things are left loose and they fling off on you, you're going to overheat your car. You're going to lose your belt, lose your alternator, lose your water pump, lose your power steering. If that happens, you need to pull over immediately. Never ever try to limp your way home when your car is overheating. When this particular car is overheating, you will warp the cylinder head. Last but not least, don't forget this cap. So I did decide to use the OEM coolant this time, mixed with distilled water. I've already put 1 gallon in. I'm gonna put probably it's gonna take about half of the second gallon. And I'll do that kind of while the car is running. That way, by the time everything heats up, you know, the thermostat will open up and everything will be all good. Make sure that you have that bleed screw out of there when you're filling it back up. So that is it for changing a water pump on an E46 BMW. If you're doing this, you might want to think about doing the thermostat housing as well, because those tend to crack with age. And also definitely replace your expansion tank if you haven't already. Those probably, you know, do those every 75,000 miles to be safe. Water pump, maybe you can go, you know, you can go over 100, 125, something like that. You probably want to replace it right about then, because I think they fail probably around the 150 range. I honestly don't know what the statistic is. Nobody's ever really done that study, but replace it before that just to be safe. You know what I mean? Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to see more. I'm the 50s Kid. Thanks a lot for watching.